In 1982, Al Newharth came to found a newspaper that revolutionized the way people looked at media. This newspaper was USA Today. At a time when newspapers looked like this, USA Today launched with this. Besides the color, which most cite as the main divider between other newspapers of the time, the difference between the two might not seem all that apparent. When it was first released, it put an emphasis on brevity in its writing, similar to a television broadcast, and a compact but simple design on the newspaper. According to Patrick Kiger's article on Newharth on AARP, Newharth, quote, hired Lou Harris, the pollster who helped John F. Kennedy win presidency in 1960, to help him figure out how to attract readers. It was Harris who told Gannett's board of directors that the television generation simply is not going to fight its way through dull gray newspapers, no matter how good they are. Newharth came to rely on Harris so much that Gannett actually purchased his polling firm. End quote. While other newspapers would put an emphasis on text and filling the page with content, USA Today took a different approach. As opposed to the current newspapers, USA Today would fill a page mostly with pictures and graphics to depict the story they were telling, showing poll data or pie charts. The image was a hook onto the story, and this was what readers would first look at. Newharth, in his goal of bringing his audience what they wanted, predominantly covered entertainment news and sports news to satisfy. Other newspapers would see the rise of USA Today as a visual competitor with television. It was a new design formula that had never been seen before in newspapers. Danny Paskin, in his research on graphics, said, another element made famous by the USA Today is the snapshot, a small, easy-to-read graphic showing a current trend. Originally, the paper was just to have one snapshot. At the last minute, Newharth decided to have snapshots in each of the front pages. When the USA Today was launched, it would take 4 hours to produce a single snapshot, not counting the research involved. Perhaps one of USA Today's most well-known and acclaimed feat was their weather map. It took up one full page and was completely in color. In the 1980s, this was far from typical. Other newspapers typically had a brief forecast at the top corner of the front page, with a weather box depicting areas of interest in fronts. Sometimes they would state the weather of the past 2 to 3 days, but it was never as extensive as the weather map that released with USA Today. USA Today's weather map appeared on the back page of the paper. It displayed prominent areas of interest and the temperature of every state, and all in bright color. George Roerich, the artist behind the USA Today and its color map, had this to say about the process. The weather page had 10 colors, plus white, 16 city data boxes, a color key, and the full color weather feature. This all had to be sent to production by 6 p.m., 5 days a week. The process was cut, paste, then cut flaps for the color separation. In those days, before the computer, we had to cut flaps to add color to the drawings. I didn't especially like the effect, so I added more flaps. The purpose was to softening the hard flat color and to create graduated color effects. In other words, I wanted to create the effect of reflective color. Peggy Stark-Adam of Stark-Adam Design had this to say about the newspaper's influence. That innovative weather map, those how it happened graphics, they started a major trend that helped the reader understand complicated information. I loved the color in USA Today, and especially liked the way things were color-coded. I believe color is information and can enhance, engage, and guide the eyes of the reader. So the introduction of so much color in USA Today was a glorious and welcome addition to the newspaper design arena. At times, I thought there was too much color when it was used as decoration and not information. But I thought, hey, why not? This is a revolution. USA Today's founding design director, Richard Curtis, who retired in 2008, had this to say about the beginning months of the newspaper. No one ever said, we can't do that because we've never done it before. In fact, we usually did the opposite simply because it hadn't been done before. In his article on success and upstart of USA Today, Patrick Keeger had this to say: "Journalism's traditionalists generally hated USA Today, branding it McPaper. While Newhart's experimental publication took years to become profitable, it quickly built a devoted readership, particularly among East Coast sports fans who liked getting late game scores from the West Coast, and travelers who appreciated the Daily Digest news in all 50 states. One not very well known fact about the newspaper was that it also changed its own newspaper box. It stood on corners displaying the front page of the newspaper, in a box that others said looked like a television set. Because of Newhart's desire to emulate television storytelling, this seems like an intentional design." Joseph of Joseph Design recalls the newspaper box. "I remember the first USA Today as if it were yesterday. It arrived in a futuristic honor box with rounded corners, so different from the squared-off boxes that anchored most street corners. This was a time when people scanned honor boxes the way they look at their mobile phones today, for a quick read of the news. Just as the box was different, so was the newspaper inside. Vivid color, infographics, sections, weather, tightly edited articles that did not jump. Game changers all. And the biggest game changer, the concept of a national newspaper." Roger Black of Roger Black Design had this to say about the newspaper: "What USA Today did was to make the news more accessible. Their innovative ideas were widely imitated. Pop culture content of Life section, absent from most papers in the 80s, is now a staple. Information graphics were widely adopted. As for the impact today of the newspaper, that is all too clear. Others emulate the bright color, the weather page, the brevity, and optimism. John K. Hartman said this on USA Today's evolution of the newspaper world. It cut into the readership of nearly every regional newspaper in the country and forced them to grudgingly change their ways and be more responsive to readers, especially younger readers who were more television-oriented and were beginning to reject traditional newspapers. Even though its launch was met with vehement backlash and criticism, today, USA Today's format has been imitated and adopted by many, even its most harsh critics. USA Today's unique format helped push newspapers into the modern era and has changed what people think of as design staples. Graphics, color, and photographs are now all a mainstay on newspapers today, and it isn't that big of a leap to credit USA Today with this design choice." As a conclusion, here are some images of the front pages of newspapers through the ages.